What is up, you guys? This is JP coming at you with another fitness video. If you guys are new to my channel, this is the first time seeing this video, or if you guys are frequent to my channel but you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel, click like on this video, click the notification bell. I'd really appreciate it. I drop a lot of fitness videos. I do live streams where I answer all your guys' questions, so that would really help me out. Let's kind of go over a couple things first before we get into this video. Is one, this video is probably going to be pretty long, so if you don't want, a long video, obviously you're going to tell by the time already, but I'm just letting you know I'm going to try and not make it crazy long, but I can't make any promises just because of the topic at hand. The second thing is, or the third thing is, for anything fitness related, whether that's in-person training programs, head on over to jpfitnesspro.com. That's the easiest way to get info about me, to reach out to me. I have links to my social medias on there, but you can follow me anyways on my social medias at jpfitnesspro. But again, my website, jpfitnesspro.com, has everything. My training programs are going to be dropping July 1st, 2020. That's July 1st of this year. So make a mental note, mark it on your calendars. Pick one of those up when they are ready on July 1st. Last thing before I get into the video is, I'm not sure what I'm going to title this video yet, but regardless, my goal of this video and my aim of this video is to not overly critique Jeff. That's not my goal at all. So if you think that I'm trying to, just kind of go at him and say something bad, or trying to just not understand his points, that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to clarify a topic for the audience. So again, I really like his channel. In my opinion, when it comes to his niche, I think the guy's a genius. His channel is amazing. He comes up with the most unique exercises for the best purposes, probably better than anyone I've ever seen. So for his niche, even Everyday on Day Fitness, I believe his name's Alan Roberts. He said it like, I wouldn't go to maybe Jeff for the best powerlifting advice. I'd probably go to someone else, but for his niche, one of the best guys on YouTube. I think he deserves every single subscriber, and I love his channel. So just kind of wanted to get that stuff out of the way first. But today's video is going to be about a topic that's kind of been popping up on his channel. He's mentioned one thing about this before, and it kind of surprised me when he said it. It was probably about I would say about 20 videos ago. I can't remember what video it was on. If you are an avid follower of his channel, you'll probably know what video it was. I watch a lot of his videos, but I just can't remember what specific video it was, but it was pretty recent. He made a comment about PubMed and studies. He said something, and I'm just paraphrasing here. He said something along the lines of, if you are talking to someone and they bring up PubMed, then you should immediately just disregard what they're saying. He said something along those lines. And then more recently, probably about 3 videos ago of his, I think it was in his, he did a video about quarter squats, and he mentioned, there's a lot of stuff that was happening in that video. He mentioned, he took a shot at someone, I think it was Jeremy Ethier, I think that's how you pronounce his name. I think he took a shot at him, I'm not sure, I'm not about to be talking about that. And then he made another comment on studies where he said, you guys don't get used to this. I'm paraphrasing. He said, don't get used to this. I'm not going to be doing this often. I'm not going to be bringing up studies that much. I much more prefer to rely on experience. So between these two comments that he's had on studies and PubMed, and there's kind of like, when he first made that comment on PubMed, it was a little surprising. Because if you guys know about YouTube fitness, you may have realized that in the last couple years, 5 years, that the evidence-based fitness community is growing due to many people in the fitness industry. Jeff Cavaliere kind of being one of them. He's not so evidence-based in the sense, I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm saying that he's not a YouTuber or someone who brings up evidence a lot. Obviously, he likes talking about the human body, how it works, its structure and function. I mean, the guy's a physical therapist, he's extremely smart. But what I meant by that is that he's not bringing up studies in that form of way. He's not constantly bringing them up. He doesn't reference a lot to studies. Whereas other YouTubers, like another person that commented on his video was Jeff Nipper, someone who often brings up studies and references studies to himself. And he commented on that video where Jeff Cavaliere was talking about quarter squats. So there was a lot going on there, and obviously there was respect between them two based off of what they said. But again, going back to what I was saying about what Jeff said about studies, is he kind of seems to be having I think I kind of jumped the gun there, but in the last about 5 years, the evidence-based, I don't know roughly the time, but more recently, in the grand scheme of things, more recently, the evidence-based fitness community has been on a rise. And a lot of people like to reference studies when they're talking about fitness. You might have been talking to a friend, you might have been watching someone on YouTube, and many places you might have come into contact with it, whether it be an article, a blog, an Instagram post. A lot of people recently, in the last 5 to 10 years, 5 years, maybe more so, 5 years, have been referencing studies when they're bringing up exercise. And this is kind of created, from what I've been seeing, and just the comments that I've been seeing, it's kind of created just a very small tear in the fitness community in regards to these camps. And this is kind of, we went full circle a little bit, but this is what sparked Jeff Cavaliere's comment the first time about studies. And I'm sure this is what, I already know this is what he was talking about because he talked about it. That, you know, when he said that comment about if someone brings up PubMed, you shouldn't listen to them. Again, I can't speak for him, but by that, a lot of people might have got thrown off, you know, and said like, oh dang, I thought he was about science, because that's what science is. That's the basis of science, and the scientific method is you have something, a hypothesis, you test that hypothesis, and then like, okay, after it passes testing, you can say, well, this is, this makes sense, it works, or whatever it is you're talking about. That is science. So when he kind of dogged the study, it was, in a way, it almost seemed to not science. You know, his logo is putting the science back in strength. Studies are science, a well study is science. And what I'm trying to say is, if I were to talk to him, and obviously I wasn't talking to him because he was saying this on a video, he's not going to explain all this. He knows obviously, I know he knows because he's extremely smart. He's a physical therapist for a reason. He knows how to read a study, and he knows a good study when he sees one, and he knows the impact of a good study. And like we're about to talk about in a little bit, he knows that there are hierarchies of evidence. He knows certain forms of evidence way more than other forms of evidence. So, you know, obviously Joe Schmo writing his blog online, whatever he says isn't going to have the same weight or the same impact as a really good meta-analysis is going to have, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But what I'm trying to get at is that's the point though. Jeff knows this. So when he made this comment about someone referencing PubMed, I don't want to be speaking for him, but I'm going to have to fill in a little bit of the gaps. I don't think he was talking about someone bringing up a very good study as a point to an argument. Because again, as we're talking a little bit, you can't solely rely on studies. You know, I'm kind of jumping ahead here a little bit, but you can't solely rely on studies. You have to rely on practical experience as well. So you have to take the best research evidence that's out there, then you have to combine it with your actual practical experience, and then what the client needs and wants. And all of this I'm talking about, remember, is in reference to personal training, fitness, that type of stuff, hypertrophy, all the performance forms of training. I'm not talking about other sciences. Even though this can apply to other sciences and other jobs as well. But that's what you have to do, is you have to take the best research evidence, your experience, and then what the client wants and needs. You can't just take one of them. You know, you can't take what the best evidence says and look at the best evidence and say, well, I don't care about that, I'm just gonna go by my experience. And then you can't just go by, what the best evidence says. Or either you can't only go off of, it just depends, you can't go off of one or the other. And you can't go off of just studies, and then you can't go off of just experience. You have to look at both, because again, you could put someone in a scenario where both might come out on top. Practical experience wins out over what a study says, or what a study says wins out over practical experience. Or maybe, you learn something new, so you can't go off your experience because you're learning something new. The evidence doesn't, cover it, and then it's something that your client wants or needs, you know? So you kind of, again, you have to combine these three things and you have to look at it. So when Jeff made that comment, and again, I told you guys this was gonna be a long video, so I don't really feel too bad, but when Jeff made that comment, it threw me around a little bit. I had to sit there and think about it because I know he understands, like I said, what a good study is, you know? So when he made that comment, he was primarily talking about the people that do not look at practical experience. He was talking about those people who ignore practical experience and are all science-based. They are all science-based. They are all for science. They're all just, you know, oh, let's pull out a study and talk about this study and this study and this study and this study. When there are flaws to that, okay? There are a lot of flaws to that. You can't just talk about studies because there's a lot we learn about practical experience. There's a lot we learn from that. And then, so that's where that stems from. I know that's where it stems from Jeff Cavaliere because that's why he said that. He wouldn't have said it if he didn't feel that way. And we see it all the time. Like I said, I've seen it being in this industry. I used to be that way. You know, when I first started training, I'm a very objective person. You know, I was all for studies. And while I do think studies are extremely important, don't get me wrong, if you're only relying on that, you have the guy who tries to be super objective. He tries to be super, I don't want to say he tries to be super right, but the thing is, studies don't cover everything. If you're a YouTuber or if you're a trainer and you think that studies are the end all be all, that's it, closed book, case closed, here's a study I found on PubMed, bam, I don't give a fuck what you say. That's not how it works, okay? That is not how it works, and that's what Jeff was talking about. Those types of people who thinks that studies are the end all be all, they pull us and be like, oh, well, this is, you know, this is what this study says, so what you're saying is wrong, I don't care anymore, you know, when you can't go off of that. So at face value, again, Jeff's comment could be a little bit kind of, if you don't know fitness, if you're not in the fitness realm, and I like to think that I generally know what I'm talking about, since I put a lot of work into this, but if you're not into the fitness realm, you may think, wow, like, you know, there's a lot that goes to unpack out of what Jeff said, because, you know, what if someone pulls out a study from PubMed, because again, PubMed's a database where you can look up studies. What if I pull out an actual good study and I show someone, well, you know, here's a good study, and you have a discussion about it. See, so he didn't mean in the sense that, like, he didn't mean that it's bad to have references and reference studies and talk about studies, because even then, Jeff Nippert commented on that video about I think it was like 2 or 3 videos ago where he did the video about quarter squatting. Jeff Nippert commented on it. Jeff Nippert always brings up studies, and Jeff said that he respects him, so he must know about his content. He must, you know, like his stuff. So it's clearly not that Jeff has a problem with studies. He has a problem with people who constantly talk about studies like they're the end all be all. They're just, you know, here you go, here's your study. That's it, I don't want to hear what you have to say, because that's not how it works, okay? Like I said earlier, you need to look at the evidence, but you also need to combine it with your experience, okay? And regardless of studies, there are limitations. So despite how long this video has been so far, I'm going to go over a couple, I'm gonna go over a few more things, okay? So first, this triangle right here. This triangle is basically going over the hierarchies of evidence, okay? It's basically going over what you should weigh more than other forms of evidence. You watching this video, if you're not a personal trainer, you're just someone who watches my content, or you're a new person, you may, in the fitness realm, how the hell do you know what to follow? When I first started training, I was like, who do I follow? This guy on YouTube, this guy's giving me a study. I don't know what the hell to follow. If he's referencing this, is it a good study? I don't know. Okay, I didn't know what to follow. This triangle basically is telling you kind of what to go follow. So the bottom of this triangle is the stuff that has less weight, less impact, or less, it should have a lower level of influence than the things above you essentially should have. And there are always exceptions, okay? But at the bottom, the stuff that isn't as weighted or isn't as impactful or shouldn't have as much sway in your thinking, but still is very important. I'm not saying it's not important. You know, it's basically, again, it's not as you know, impactful, or like, you get what I'm trying to say with this. It's not as impactful or shouldn't have as much weight in your decision making as the things above it. So the stuff that's on the bottom is case studies and expert opinion. I'm not going to get super in depth on all of these. I'm just going to briefly talk about them. A case study is a study about one person or a small group of people. So again, a very, 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 very small population. You're not comparing it to something else. For example, you could do a case study, if you're a personal trainer, you could do a case study on your client, something very small. And I'm not saying go out of the way and make something, hurt your client or treat your client like an experiment. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that, let's just say your client, feels better, they like doing higher reps or something, and then you start doing higher reps and you're like, wow, this higher reps looks better for them, let's just say they see much more improvement in hypertrophy with training in a 30 to 35 rep range than a 20 to 25 rep range. That's you kind of doing a case study. Again, so it's just basically a study on a very small group of people where you're not having another control group. It's just one person. You're not comparing it to something else. Expert opinion is just that. It's opinion of experts. There are good experts, aka Jeff Cavaliere, Omar Isuf, Jeff Nippard, Greg Knuckles. There are bad experts. I'm not about to start saying bad experts out here. You already know who they are. So that's at the bottom. The next step up is observational research. Basically, this is it's exactly what it is. You're just observing something, okay? And the best example of this is epidemiology. So, which is it's basically when you're looking at a whole large population and health outcomes and disease. So, for example, an example of observational research could be let's just say there's part of the United States where a lot of people tend to smoke a lot, okay? And you also notice that in the same area of the United States where people tend to smoke a lot, they also die earlier. You might be able to say, I'm observing something here. These people smoke a lot, they die early. There might be a link between the two. Now, might be the link is the key, because this is where that whole phrase of, correlation does not mean causation. There's a correlation there, but you can't directly say that, in this example, just an example, if you were to look at that population, you cannot directly say that the people in that population are in fact dying earlier because of the smoking. Because again, you're not controlling, there's no control group, you're just kind of watching what's happening. In the next step up in the hierarchy, you have other controlled trials. Other controlled trials are just, again, all of these are kind of self-explanatory just by reading them. But basically, it's when let's just say you're doing a study, any study, because you're trying to find something out, and you have 3 groups. Let's just say you want to see if caffeine boosts strength for a workout. You give one group, 200 milligrams of caffeine, you give another group 400 milligrams of caffeine, and then you give one group a placebo. You have 3 groups, and one group is a control group, and that's kind of in the name right there, other controlled trials. You're running a trial with a control group, you're seeing what happens there with the result, and then you're comparing it to the control group or the placebo. The next step up in the hierarchy is a randomized control trial. As in the name, it's the same as other control trials, except the people that are going to be in the groups for the study are going to be randomized. So, instead of just kind of having certain populations and certain types of people in this group and in this group, you're completely randomizing the people and then putting them in the groups. One thing to note is that between randomized control trials, even though it's higher up on the chain of hierarchy of evidence, other control trials in certain circumstances can actually be more beneficial, especially in fitness, because you don't want randomized people in certain studies. For example, if you are testing which training, let's just say 2 training programs, training program A and training program B, and you want to see which program leads to better hypertrophy or more hypertrophy. You don't want to randomize the groups because you want them to have similar starting levels of strength. So similar average levels of strength between group A and group B. If you don't sit there and kind of systematically put and make sure that the groups are balanced to an extent, or balanced on their starting strength levels, let's just say you randomize them completely and they have different starting strength levels, you cannot truly say that program A or program B gave better hypertrophy, because let's just say group A had a higher starting average strength than group B. That tells us in training experts and people doing this study that they were more well trained. If you're more well-trained, that means a more well-trained athlete sees progress slower and slower. Think about it. Beginners see progress fast due to nervous system adaptation, skill acquisition, and muscle mass. So if the group B had a little less average strength, something of significance, then they might see gains faster because of beginner gains, not because of the program B was actually better. You see what I'm saying? So there are certain circumstances where a regular, like a controlled trial, is better than a randomized controlled trial. Now, going up at the very, very, very top of the pyramid, you have meta-analyses, and systematic reviews. A meta-analysis is just simply put a study of studies. A meta-analysis, or actually a systematic review and a meta-analysis, are both study of studies. I was just breaking them up because I was going to go over the differences, but they're both a study of studies, okay? They're both taking a bunch of studies, looking at the studies and saying, okay, what can we tell from all of these studies? So instead of just being one study, you're looking at a bunch of studies and saying, okay, well, what do all these studies say? What can I get from, what conclusion can I draw from all of these good studies, So obviously, when one study is good, but when you can have a bunch of studies the same thing, that's when you have extremely, extremely strong evidence, when you can replicate something and it happens over and over. So if you have enough studies on a subject to have a systematic review or a meta-analysis, then obviously it's still not a case closed, done, that's it forever. That's not what I'm saying, but you have a really strong case at hand. The difference between a systematic review and a meta-analysis is that a meta-analysis actually has a statistical analysis ran on all of the studies. Basically, they're running like numbers and equations and calculations and saying, okay, here are actual numbers that show the weight of this evidence between all of the studies. A systematic review is just taking a bunch of studies and reviewing what all of these studies are saying. So the only difference is a meta-analysis has a statistical analysis done on it, whereas a systematic review doesn't. So this is just a study of studies. Basically, it's just like a group of RCTs or other controlled trials combined into one big pool and saying, what does this pool of RCTs and other controlled trials say? Which again, if you have a bunch of studies saying the same thing, that's better than one study saying the same thing. So now that we kind of covered all of these things, give you guys a rundown on studies, bringing it all home to the initial point is that you have to look at the bottom of the pyramid is expert opinion. I don't care how good their expert opinion is, they still are, it's just expert opinion. You could be at the very top of this part of the pyramid, which would be a good expert opinion, or you could be at the bottom part of this pyramid, which would be bad expert opinion. But for example, if you are an expert in the field, and remember, this is all ties into what Jeff was saying, Jeff Cavaliere. If you are an expert in the field, let's just say you're Joe Schmo, and you say you're training people, or you're taking a client and your client has no preferences. They say, I don't care how many sets I have to do, I just want the best results. And you're training your client and you're saying that, I think that 4 sets per muscle group per week are the most you should ever do, because that's what I learned when I trained myself. I learned in my own opinion that 4 sets per muscle group per week is the most you ever need to do. You don't need to do more than that. And that's what I learned on my own, and that's what I learned training people, because those people got good results doing that. Okay, that's good. That's expert opinion, because that's his opinion and he's an expert. And again, anyone could call themselves an expert. But we have meta-analyses saying that you can see optimal muscle growth starting at 10 sets per muscle group per week and greater. So basically what it came to a conclusion is 10 to 20 sets per muscle group per week, or 10 plus sets per muscle group per week. So, and that's what a meta-analysis showed us. So if you're looking at the hierarchy of evidence here, who am I going to take? Joe Schmo's opinion, at the bottom of the hierarchy of evidence, or am I going to take what a meta-analysis shows us? Or even if it was just an RCT, if it was a good randomized control trial that's showing me a very strong randomized control trial that's showing me, hey, Joe Schmo, hey man, this really good randomized control trial said 10 sets per muscle group per week is better than you're saying that I should never do more than 4 sets per muscle group per week. So again, this is where expert opinion fails us, and you have to go by best research evidence. Because remember, in that example I gave you with Joe Schmo, his client said he didn't care how many sets he did. He didn't have a preference. Now, if the client said, hey, I don't have that much time, I don't like doing a lot of sets, I hate getting sore, I don't want to be doing here, I don't want to be here all day, you have to take what the client wants as well. But I didn't say that in my scenario. So in my scenario, Joe Schmo gave him something that's inferior because he wasn't taking the best research evidence out there. So he was only going by his experience. He wasn't taking all 3 of these and putting them together. He was only taking 2. Let me give you another opinion though, another example though. Let's just say Joe Schmo's brother is training someone, and let's just call him Fly Guy. Joe Schmo and Fly Guy. Let's just say Fly Guy has an expert, he's an expert and he has an expert opinion, and he says, I'm gonna make something up for this one. Let's just say he says that, he just said keeping your eyes wide open when you're doing curls gets you the best gains. And he said, that's what I say. And someone says, hey, Fly Guy, I looked up and I found a randomized control trial that says that closing your eyes is the best when you're doing bicep curls to get the best gains. And then Fly Guy says, hey, I already looked at the evidence. There's also another randomized control trial saying the opposite of that randomized control trial. So we got 2 randomized control trials saying opposite things, which can happen. So I decided to go off of my personal experience, my expert opinion, and tell you guys to keep your eyes open when you're doing curls, okay? Because, so you see how I'm saying is that the guy that tried to tell Fly Guy that he was wrong didn't look at the totality of evidence. Fly Guy looked at randomized control trials that conflict each other, and think about it, I'm not saying do this is all just made up studies I'm talking about, the eyes open and closed, but with the eyes open curling, there's no harm in keeping your eyes open. It's not like he's saying that you got to throw the dumbbell up to the ceiling and catch it, because obviously that's not safe. But I'm just saying, keeping your eyes open really wide when you're curling, it's not harmful, it's very practical to do. And if Joe Schmo said that it worked for him, and there's conflicting randomized control trials saying one thing and then saying the other, then hey, in that case, because you have RCTs kind of canceling each other out, you might need to rely on expert opinion. So this is where expert opinion would actually take over best research evidence. So that's another point, is what I'm saying, is you kind of have to look at, again, that's another example, is where it's, your experience won out over best research evidence. So that's another thing you have to think about. Studies cancel each other out, and that's where you might need to say, I'm not sure. So on top of studies canceling each other out, you have to think there are such thing as poorly designed studies. There's on top of studies just being done like shit because the people running the studies don't know what they're doing. For example, if they're trying to see what diet works best, and they're giving 2 groups 2 different diets, but they're not controlling for protein intake, or let's just say this is really bad. Let's just say they're controlling for macros, but they're not controlling for calories. And they said that diet A is better than diet B because they lost more weight, but they didn't control for calories. That's what I'm saying. Like that wouldn't, I hope that wouldn't happen in, a diet study like that. But if it did happen, they didn't control for the most important variable, which I don't care what type of study it was, but again, that wouldn't even be, that poor study is what I'm trying to say. So you have to think about the quality of evidence you're looking at too. So if you have good expert opinion and someone's trying to say, well, and this goes back to what Jeff said, is, oh, here's a PubMed study here, here's a PubMed study, and it's a shittily done study. And that's one thing that Jeff did bring up too. If they're just reading the abstract, that's also it. A lot of people will just pop out a study and think that it's a study, so it's a study. No, all studies are not made the same. So you have to look at the quality of the evidence they're providing you. So if you're taking that into account, you got to think like, okay, so that's where expert opinion might win out. You might say, well, that study's not done that well, and this I've actually seen with my own 2 eyes, and I've done this for years, great evidence. I've seen other people doing it differently, but I like doing it this way, and there isn't any strong evidence to counteract my opinion. Now, again, using study example, if you, let's just say, for example, rest periods are a good one. For a long time, and let's just take me for an example. For a long time, me as a personal trainer years ago, I used to think that shorter rest periods were better for hypertrophy. But then when I started, this is before I really looked up studies. I kind of just read textbooks, which textbooks have references to studies. But again, I didn't check all those studies myself. Textbooks have bias, and that's another thing with studies. You have to think about biases. Another flaw of studies is rest periods. I didn't think about rest. I just kind of thought short rest periods were better because of the textbooks I read. But when I started, over the years, when I got smarter, I started looking at things a little bit more broad, looking at studies. I realized that the evidence leans heavily in favor to longer rest periods. Not many rest periods. I think there's like one that shows that shorter rest periods are superior to long rest periods, but they actually had a flaw in that study. I forgot what it was. But actually the evidence is heavily in favor for longer rest periods. Now, if you're short on time, longer rest periods might not be practical, and that's where client wants and needs might come in, or your wants and needs might come in. So fuck the study. If I can't get home to my kids or eat or whatever, I don't have kids, but if that's what you're saying, I can't get home to that shit, I don't care. Fuck what the study says. That doesn't mean shit when it's not practical. But if you have time to work out and you want the best results, and you're like, well, I see great results, or my friend said he's seen great results from short rest periods, well, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do that because he told me that. Because you're a friend, that would probably be less than expert opinion. He's not even an expert. That's probably down here, friend's opinion. That doesn't even train. So friend's opinion, pretend that's below the pyramid. Your friend's telling you this, but you have actual studies telling you that longer rest periods are better. If you have time to work out and you just want the best gains, why are you obviously you shouldn't be taking your friend's non-expert opinion over what the large body of evidence says in regards to rest periods. So again, what I'm trying to say with all this is that, and it all ties back into it, I told you guys this was going to be a long video, is that you have to go up the hierarchy of evidence, but not all evidence is made the same. You have to look at quality. You have to look at quality of evidence. You have to look at the biases that are at hand. You cannot cherry pick. If you have a really good study saying A, but then you have a really good study saying B, sometimes shit happens in studies. Sometimes it's just luck of the draw. So you get studies saying opposite things. So in that, again, you have quality, you have biases, you have you can't cherry pick. You have to look at the totality of evidence, and then there are certain instances where you have to look. Okay, should I take my if I told you my expert opinion was to I think throwing a plate up in the air as hard as you can and catching it is a 45-pound plate as hard as the air catching it is going to work power. Of course throwing a 45 plate is going to work power, but is throwing a plate in the air and catching it safe to do? Fuck no, it's not. So you have to, now that's an extreme, but you have to take in little things like that. Like, for example, one thing that Jeff Cavaliere talks about, this is actual realistic example. A lot of people talk about, sissy squatting or squatting, doing sissy squats. If you don't know what a sissy squat is, please look them up. It's basically a squat where your heels come up off the ground and your knees travel really far forward. Technically, yes. Are you going to get more quad activation with the sissy squat? Yes. The moment arm for the knee is longer, which means that when it comes to extending the leg, which is a function of the quads, it's going to make that harder, which is going to work your quads more. But Jeff Cavaliere says that that's not healthy due to the effects it's going to have on your tibia and your knee. It's going to have it's going to basically fuck your knees up. So in that sense, while a study might show that you have higher quad activation, that in doing a sissy squat, Jeff is saying with his expert opinion that that's not very safe, and I'm sure there's studies that show that that's bad for knees anyways. What I'm saying is that that's where you might need to weigh expert opinion above what a study says about quad activation, because you want to protect your knees in the long run. So all in all, I'll kind of sum up the video, is you have to take in all forms of evidence, okay? You have to take in everything. You have to weigh them. You can't, it's not a black and white. You have to sit there and analyze it. Should this expert opinion be better than, or if it's a really good meta-analysis and it's counter to what I'm saying as an expert, I should probably listen to the meta-analysis. If there's a, controlled trial telling me to do something, but what I'm saying isn't harmful at all, it's what I've seen has been effective, and it's what my client wants, then I'm going to listen to myself over what a study says, especially if it's safe. I like it and my client likes it. Why would I not? So that's basically what Jeff was saying about the PubMed thing and what he's getting sick of. He's getting sick of people just jumping to evidence when it's not all about evidence. It's also about your experience too. So it's what the trainer's experience. You have to combine the two. You have to combine what you learn what you learn in the gym, what you teach people, what the best research says. Because research, if you look at this hierarchy of evidence, is ahead of expert opinion. So if you have a really strong meta-analysis saying something against your expert opinion, you might want to consider looking at that and changing your opinion. And that's where, as trainers, we have to be moving forward. Our word is not law. We can't just sit there. You need to be able to kind of, I don't want to say conform, but you got to be able to sit there and know when to change your opinion and say, hey, I was wrong. Like I used to be about the rest periods, but at the same time, you got to know when to say, you know what, this is where I feel like I need to stick to my guns because this is a little shaky evidence for whatever it is. And then also too, one thing to know is practical experience leads studies. A lot of the things that Golden Age bodybuilders did were wrong, but a lot of the things that Golden Age bodybuilders did were also right. So you have to think is that studies take a long time to come out. Good, solid evidence is not quick, it's not fast, it doesn't come out very fast. So a lot of the times as practitioners, trainers, and people who coaches, our work in the field, in a gym, on the field or whatever, is going to be ahead of research. So a lot of the times you're going to come to things where there's no evidence at all, and you have to make a conclusion. Like I said, throwing a weighted plate might theoretically, be something that could generate power, but it's not safe and practical. So again, a lot of the times you just have to use your own experience and your own judgment and what the client wants and needs, because there's there's no evidence there. And just because there's no evidence doesn't mean that, just because there's absence of evidence doesn't mean it's evidence of absence. So I might have completely fucked that up, but you get what I mean. But when in regards to research, sometimes it's just not there, so you have to go off your own experience. So all in all, that's what Jeff was trying to say. He doesn't just like it when people throw out studies like it's the end all be all. They ignore practical experience. You can't do that. It's not smart. It's not wise. Studies are not the end all be all. They have flaws. They have biases. They vary in different forms of quality. Sometimes studies conflict each other. Science is extremely slow with coming up very strong evidence for everything. Science is a lot of gray area. It's very rarely is a black and white. So you have to fill in the gaps with your actual experience. So it's both, it's all of it combined together. It's not one, it's not the other. So that's what Jeff Cavaliere was trying to say. Sorry for the really long video. I told you it was gonna be a long video. I appreciate you guys watching. If you watched to the end, I really appreciate it. Kind of think of this like a podcast. If you guys have any questions, comments, leave them down below. I'd love to know what you think. Like I said, I really like Jeff's channel. I like this kind of topic. It's been coming, and there's been I feel like there's been a lot of tension when it comes to this topic, and yeah, it's been kind of, I don't want to say it's driving me nuts, but it's a lot of tension with this topic, and people kind of like butting heads in regards to should I focus on the science, or you're being too picky with all the science. I just want to get in there and lift. And then there's the people who are just straight bros and they completely never look at science. So I feel like I needed to make this video. So if you guys have any questions, comments, leave them down below. If you could give this video a thumbs up, you could subscribe to my channel, if you could share this video, if you could click the notification bell, all that good stuff, I'd really appreciate it. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.